The first time I saw the invoice, I actually laughed. Not a real laugh, more like that sound you make when your brain can't process what your eyes are seeing. $660,000, itemized, line by line, detailing every perceived failure of my motherhood, printed on cream-colored cardstock with my son's business letterhead at the top. We were supposed to be planning my mother's funeral. Instead, I was holding what felt like a death certificate for our relationship. But let me back up. 3 months earlier, none of this seemed possible. I was standing in my kitchen in Phoenix, the August heat making the tile floor warm even through my slippers. The coffee maker was gurgling, that familiar morning sound that usually meant comfort. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus, my son. Need to talk. Important. Nothing unusual there. We talked every few days, sometimes about nothing, sometimes about his work in real estate development. He'd done well for himself, better than I ever imagined when he was that scrawny kid who couldn't sit still in church. I remember pausing with my coffee mug halfway to my lips, staring at those 3 words on the screen. Need to talk. Important. There was something about the period after talk that felt ominous, like a door closing. But I pushed the feeling aside. Marcus was always dramatic about his business deals, treating every contract negotiation like a life-or-death situation. This was probably about some zoning issue or investor meeting. I texted back a thumbs up and went about my morning. The air conditioning kicked on, and I remember thinking how grateful I was for small comforts. At 62, you learn to appreciate the simple things. A cool house in Arizona summer, coffee that's still hot when you drink it, a son who texts his mother. I spent the morning going through Mom's bills. Physical therapy invoice, $480 for the week. Medication refills, another $300. The memory care facility wanted to talk about upgrading her room because she'd been wandering at night, which would mean another $1,500 a month. I made notes, transferred money from her account to cover the immediate expenses, and tried not to think about how fast her savings were evaporating despite my best efforts. The house felt too quiet. It had been quiet since the divorce, 15 years of living alone, but that morning the silence seemed to press against my eardrums. I turned on the radio, found a station playing oldies, and let the music fill the empty spaces while I organized receipts into folders. Blue for medical, green for facility costs, yellow for personal expenses. A system I'd developed to keep everything straight, everything accountable. That afternoon, we met at a cafe near his office in Scottsdale. The kind of place with exposed brick and Edison bulbs where a sandwich costs $15. Marcus was already there, scrolling through his phone with that intense focus he got when he was working. He'd inherited that from his father, that ability to tune out the world. When he looked up and saw me, something flickered across his face. I couldn't name it then, but looking back, I think it was guilt trying to break through whatever wall he'd built. "Mom," he said, standing to kiss my cheek. His cologne was different, more expensive than usual. Something woody and sophisticated that probably cost more than my weekly grocery budget. "Thanks for coming." I slid into the seat across from him, noticing details I hadn't paid attention to before. New watch, titanium or platinum, catching the light from the Edison bulbs. Haircut fresher than usual, styled with that careful, casual look that takes time and money. Even his shirt looked different, some designer brand with subtle patterns woven into the fabric. "You look successful," I said, meaning it as a compliment. He glanced down at himself, almost embarrassed. New client insisted on lunch at the Phoenician, had to look the part. We ordered, made small talk about the heat, about his latest project, about my volunteer work at the community center. Normal things, safe things. I told him about the reading program I'd started for ESL students, how rewarding it was to see adults learn to read English for the first time. He nodded along, but I could see his attention drifting, his fingers drumming against the table in that nervous pattern he'd had since childhood. Then he leaned back in his chair, and I watched his jaw tighten the way it used to before he'd confessed to breaking something as a kid. "I've been talking to Aunt Linda," he said. The words landed like stones in still water, sending ripples through my chest. My sister. We hadn't spoken in almost a year, not since the argument about Mom's care. Linda lived in California, 3 states away from any actual responsibility, but never short on opinions about how I was handling things. "She's concerned about Grandma," Marcus continued, his eyes not quite meeting mine. "About how you're managing her finances." The words hit like a physical thing. I actually felt my chest tighten, that sharp constriction that makes you wonder if this is what a heart attack feels like. Managing her finances? "Marcus, I'm her power of attorney. I'm doing exactly what she asked me to do." "Linda says you've been withdrawing large amounts of cash." His voice was careful, practiced, like he'd rehearsed this conversation. "That you're being secretive about expenses. Have you ever had someone you love look at you like you're a stranger, like everything they knew about you just evaporated?" That's what his eyes looked like. Cold, uncertain, already convinced. "I'm paying for her care," I said slowly, trying to keep my voice steady, even as my hands started trembling. "The memory care facility costs $8,000 a month. Her medications are another $1,200. Physical therapy, 3 times a week. I've shown you the statements, Marcus, multiple times." "I know what you've shown me," he said, and there it was, that edge in his voice that said he'd already made up his mind. "But Linda talked to some of the neighbors. They're saying things, Mom, about how you're always stressed about money, how you've been selling off Grandma's things." The cafe noise seemed to amplify. The hiss of the espresso machine became a roar. Conversations from other tables crashed over me like waves. I could smell coffee grounds and burnt milk and the vanilla air freshener someone had sprayed too liberally. I sold 1 antique dresser. 1. Because my mother specifically asked me to, because she wanted the money to go toward a better wheelchair. One of those motorized ones that would give her some independence back. But in that moment, watching my son's face, I realized the truth didn't matter. Someone had painted a picture of me as a villain, and he was staring at it like it was a photograph. "What exactly did Linda say?" I asked, my voice coming out harder than I intended. Marcus shifted, uncomfortable. "She said the neighbors noticed you coming and going at odd hours, that you looked stressed, that when they asked about Mom, you were vague about the details." "I go at odd hours because I work around her schedule and mine. I'm stressed because caring for someone with dementia is stressful. And I'm vague with the neighbors because it's none of their business what medical treatments my mother is receiving." Each word felt like I was pushing a boulder uphill. "Since when does Linda care what the neighbors think?" "She's worried about you too, Mom. She thinks maybe you're in over your head, that the stress is making you—" "Making me what? Steal from my own mother." The words came out loud enough that the couple at the next table glanced over. The cafe suddenly felt too small, too loud. The espresso machine hissed like a serpent. My sandwich sat untouched on the plate, the bread starting to curl at the edges. "Who else has Linda been talking to?" I asked. He shifted in his seat, his eyes darting to the window, the menu, anywhere but my face. "Does it matter?" "Yes, Marcus, it matters, because someone is lying about me, and you're sitting here acting like it's a given that I'm the problem." "I'm not saying you are. I'm just saying there are questions." Questions. As if 33 years of motherhood could be erased by questions. As if the nights I stayed up when he had croup, walking him around the house at 3 in the morning because the steam from the shower wasn't working and his breathing sounded like sandpaper on wood. As if the second job I worked to pay for his college, coming home at midnight smelling like grease from the diner and still getting up at 6 to make him breakfast before classes. As if the divorce I went through partly because his father couldn't handle having a special needs mother-in-law, choosing to leave rather than help carry the weight of family responsibility. As if all of that was just background noise to whatever Linda had whispered in his ear. I left that cafe with my sandwich untouched and a feeling in my gut like I'd swallowed broken glass. That night, lying in bed, I tried to logic my way through it. The ceiling fan spun lazy circles above me, doing little to combat the heat that seemed to radiate from the walls, even with the AC running. Marcus was stressed. His business was expanding. He had a new girlfriend he was serious about, someone named Jessica, who worked in marketing and had never been married and didn't understand family complications. Maybe Linda had caught him at a weak moment. Maybe this would blow over. But even as I thought it, I knew I was lying to myself. There was something deliberate in the way Marcus had approached the conversation. The practiced words, the careful tone. He hadn't come to me with concerns. He'd come with accusations dressed up as questions. I got up, poured myself a glass of water, and stood at the kitchen window, looking out at the dark street. A dog barked somewhere in the distance. A car drove past, headlights sweeping across my living room wall. Normal night sounds in a normal neighborhood, but everything felt different now, tainted by suspicion. I was so tired, the kind of tired that seeps into your bones and makes you wonder if fighting is even worth it anymore. At my age, after everything, part of me just wanted peace, even if peace meant swallowing injustice. I'd read somewhere that after 6 months of separation, the trauma bond decreases only 27%. But every day without my son's trust felt like a year. The rumors started spreading within a week. I'd run into people at the grocery store, at church, at the community center where I volunteered, and I could see it in their eyes. That flicker of judgment, that step back. Mrs. Chen from my book club suddenly had to leave early every time I arrived. She'd gather her things with exaggerated urgency, checking her watch and murmuring about appointments she'd forgotten. But her eyes would slide away from mine, guilty and uncertain. Tom, who ran the food bank, stopped asking me to help with distributions. I'd volunteered there for 3 years, knew the system, knew the regulars who came in. But suddenly, he had enough helpers. Didn't need me on Thursdays anymore. Maybe I should take a break and enjoy my time. His smile was apologetic but firm, and I knew someone had gotten to him too. At church, people who used to save me a seat started arriving earlier, filling the pews so there was no room. Conversations would pause when I approached, then resume with forced brightness on topics that carefully avoided anything personal. How's the weather? Can you believe this heat? Did you see the news about the new shopping center? The isolation was suffocating. Phoenix is a sprawling city, but somehow it felt like living in a fishbowl. Everyone could see me, but no one wanted to look directly at me. My phone, which used to buzz with messages from friends, went eerily quiet. The silence was louder than any accusation. Sarah, who I'd known for 10 years, who I'd helped when her husband died, who'd cried on my shoulder about her own struggles with her aging mother, sent me a text one Tuesday morning. I heard some things. I think it's best if we take a break from our coffee dates. I hope you understand. I stared at that message for 20 minutes, reading and rereading it, looking for some hint of warmth or doubt or friendship. But it was cold, final, a door closing. I didn't respond. What could I say? Please believe me over whatever rumors you heard? I'm innocent? The very act of defending yourself can sound like guilt. I kept showing up to see Mom, kept managing her care, kept paying her bills. She was in the middle stages of dementia by then, and some days she knew me. Some days she called me by her sister's name. Some days she thought I was the nurse, asked me when her daughter was coming to visit while I sat right there holding her hand. But she smiled when I walked in, and that had to be enough. The facility staff knew me. Teresa, the head nurse, a black woman in her 40s with kind eyes and hands that could gentle even the most agitated patients, would meet me at the door. Your mom had a good day today, she'd say, or she's been asking for you. They saw the care I gave, the time I spent, the way I'd sit with Mom for hours just reading to her or playing her favorite music. But even there, I started noticing changes, whispers in the hallway that stopped when I approached. Staffers who used to chat with me becoming professionally courteous but distant. Someone was spreading poison, and it was seeping into every corner of my life. Marcus stopped returning my calls. When I texted, I got one-word responses. Busy. Later. Can't. I sent him pictures of Mom, hoping that seeing her would remind him why this mattered. She was having a good day, smiling at the camera, holding the stuffed bear he'd given her for Christmas years ago. He read the message, the little check marks confirming it, but didn't respond. I started keeping a journal, writing down every expense, every visit, every conversation, documenting my own life like I was building a legal defense, which I guess I was. I bought a scanner, scanned every receipt, every bill, organized them in folders on my computer with dates and categories. Medical expenses, facility costs, personal care items, equipment purchases. The weight of constantly proving yourself is exhausting. It's like trying to bail water out of a sinking boat with a teaspoon. No matter how much you do, the water keeps rising, and you're just one person with inadequate tools trying to stay afloat. A month passed, then 2. I forgave him every day in my head, made excuses, told myself he was confused, manipulated, stressed. I swallowed my hurt and kept the door open, kept hoping he'd walk through it and say he'd made a mistake. That's what mothers do, right? We hold space for our children even when they're tearing us apart. But forgiveness without acknowledgement is just swallowing poison and hoping the other person gets sick. During those 2 months, I developed routines to cope with the loneliness. I'd wake up at 5:30, before the sun turned the sky that particular shade of Arizona orange. Make my coffee. Sit on the back patio and listen to the desert come alive. Birds I'd never noticed before became companions. A family of quail that nested in the oleander bush. A roadrunner that would sometimes dart across the yard, pausing to look at me with one dark eye before disappearing. I'd check my phone compulsively, hoping for a message from Marcus. Nothing. I'd scroll through old photos, torturing myself with memories of better times. Marcus at 5, gap-toothed and laughing. Marcus graduating high school, awkward in his cap and gown. Marcus at 25, confident and successful, arm around me at my birthday dinner. When did we lose that? When did I become someone he could distrust so easily? The isolation was changing me in ways I didn't recognize. I'd catch myself talking out loud to empty rooms, having conversations with people who weren't there, rehearsing what I'd say to Marcus if he ever called, practicing defenses against accusations that hadn't even been formally made yet. I stopped cooking real meals. What was the point? I'd eat crackers standing at the kitchen counter, or a can of soup I didn't bother to heat. Food lost all appeal when every bite felt like it might come back up from the constant anxiety churning in my gut. My neighbor, a woman named Rita, who I'd known casually for years, stopped me one morning when I was getting the mail. "Are you okay?" she asked, genuine concern in her eyes. "You look like you've lost weight." I almost told her everything, almost broke down right there on the sidewalk. But then I saw her glance toward her house, saw the curtain move in her window, and I realized she'd probably heard the rumors too. This wasn't kindness. This was curiosity, gathering information to share at the next neighborhood gathering. "I'm fine," I said, forcing a smile. "Just busy." She nodded, unconvinced, and I walked back inside feeling even more alone than before. I lost weight, couldn't sleep, started taking antacids because my stomach was constantly churning, a burning sensation that woke me at night and made food taste like ashes. My blood pressure, which had always been perfect, suddenly spiked. My doctor, a young woman who'd been monitoring my health for 5 years, asked if I was under stress. I laughed that same not real laugh from the cafe. "Mrs. Torres, I'm serious. Your blood pressure is 140/90. That's concerning for someone with your history. What's going on?" I told her. Not everything, but enough. The accusations, the isolation, the stress of caring for my mother while being accused of exploiting her. She listened, her young face serious, then wrote me a prescription for blood pressure medication and handed me a card for a therapist. "You need support," she said, "not just medical. What you're describing is emotional abuse, gaslighting. It's affecting your physical health." I took the card but never called. Therapy felt like admission that there was something wrong with me, rather than something being done to me. I know that's backwards thinking, but logic and emotion don't always align when you're drowning. I kept the therapist's card in my wallet for weeks, taking it out sometimes, running my thumb over the embossed letters. Dr. Sarah Feldman, licensed clinical psychologist, specializing in family trauma and caregiver stress. The card became a talisman of sorts, proof that someone believed my stress was real, even if I couldn't bring myself to make the call. Instead, I threw myself deeper into Mom's care. If I couldn't fix my relationship with Marcus, at least I could be perfect in this one thing. I started visiting her twice a day instead of once. Morning and evening, structuring my entire life around her schedule. I'd read to her from books she used to love, even though I wasn't sure she understood the words anymore. Jane Austen, Isabel Allende, Mary Oliver poems that made me cry while she stared blankly at the wall. Teresa, the head nurse, pulled me aside one afternoon. "You need to take care of yourself too," she said gently. "Burnout is real, and I'm seeing the signs." "I'm fine," I said automatically. She gave me a look that said she didn't believe me. "Your mother is well cared for here. You don't need to prove anything to us. We see how much you love her." But that was exactly the problem. I did need to prove it. Because somewhere out there, my sister was telling people I was stealing from Mom. My son was believing it. And if I wasn't here, constantly visible, constantly devoted, what would they say then? The facility became my second home. I knew all the staff by name, knew which aides were patient and which ones rushed through their duties. I knew which residents were lonely, which ones had family who never visited. There was a man named George in the room next to Mom's, 92 years old, sharp as a tack mentally, but his body was failing. His daughter lived in Boston, couldn't visit often. I'd sit with him sometimes, just to talk, and he'd tell me stories about World War II, about the wife he'd lost 10 years ago, about the loneliness of outliving everyone you love. "You're a good daughter," he'd say. "Your mother is lucky to have you." I wanted to believe him. But belief is hard when the people who should know you best think you're a thief. Then Mom's health declined rapidly. A fall in the middle of the night, despite the padded mats around her bed. A fractured hip that required surgery. Pneumonia that set in during recovery because her lungs were already weak from years of smoking in her youth. The hospital called me at 2 a.m. I remember the phone ringing in the dark, that jarring sound that means nothing good. My heart was already pounding before I answered. "Ms. Torres, this is Desert Valley Hospital. Your mother has been admitted. You should come." I drove through empty Phoenix streets with my heart hammering, knowing this might be it. The streets were surreal in their emptiness, traffic lights changing for no one, the city holding its breath. I ran 2 red lights and didn't care. The hospital parking lot was mostly empty, just a few cars scattered under the yellow lights. She stabilized, thank God, but the doctor said we needed to talk about next steps. He was young, couldn't have been more than 40, with tired eyes and the kind of gentle voice they must teach in medical school for delivering bad news. "The fracture is repaired, but the pneumonia is aggressive. She's frail, and her dementia makes everything more complicated. We need to consider what level of intervention you want if she declines further. Hospice, maybe, or a higher level of care, more money, always more money." I sat in that sterile hospital room at 4 a.m, holding my mother's papery hand, watching her chest rise and fall with mechanical assistance, and felt the weight of the world pressing down on my shoulders. I called Marcus, left a voicemail. "Your grandmother is in the hospital. I know you're angry with me, but she would want to see you. Please." He showed up. That meant something, I told myself. He stood at the foot of her bed, looking uncomfortable in his pressed suit, fresh from some business meeting. His tie was loosened, top button undone, but otherwise he looked untouched by the chaos of a hospital room. Mom was sleeping, her breathing raspy even with oxygen. "How bad is it?" he asked, not looking at me. "Bad," I said. "We need to make decisions. Together." He nodded, and for just a second, I thought maybe this crisis would snap him out of whatever spell Linda had cast. Maybe nearly losing his grandmother would remind him who I actually was. We walked to the cafeteria, got terrible coffee from a machine that looked older than me. The cafeteria was mostly empty, just a janitor mopping in the corner and one nurse on break scrolling through her phone. Sat at a plastic table under fluorescent lights that made everyone look half dead. "I've been going through Grandma's finances," he said, pulling out his phone. "Linda sent me copies of some statements she got from the bank." My stomach dropped. The coffee suddenly tasted like battery acid. "How did Linda get those?" "She's on the account too, secondary." She wasn't. I knew she wasn't. I'd set up that account myself, specifically excluded Linda because I knew her history with money, the bankruptcies, the failed businesses, the borrowed money never returned. But before I could say anything, Marcus was scrolling through screenshots, his face getting harder with each swipe. "These withdrawals, Mom. 20,000 here, 15,000 there. What is this money for?" I explained. Again, the facility, the medications, the specialists, the upgraded room when she became a fall risk, the private aid 3 times a week because the facility was understaffed and Mom needed someone who could really pay attention to her. Every single penny accounted for, documented, necessary. "The 20,000, I said, my voice steady even though my hands were shaking, "was for the motorized wheelchair. You remember? We talked about it. She was getting frustrated being dependent on staff to push her around. The wheelchair gave her autonomy." "And the 15,000? Dental work. She needed extensive work done, and Medicare doesn't cover it. Her teeth were causing her pain, affecting her ability to eat. What was I supposed to do? Let her suffer?" He looked at me like I was speaking a foreign language. That's when I realized something that made my blood run cold. He didn't want the truth. He wanted confirmation of what he already believed. Facts couldn't compete with whatever narrative Linda had constructed, because that narrative gave him permission to be angry, to pull away, to stop feeling obligated to the messy reality of aging parents and family responsibility. Believing Linda meant he could be the victim. Believing me meant he had to face his own absence, his own failure to be present for his grandmother's decline. I was just so tired. Fighting seemed pointless when the person you're fighting for has already surrendered to someone else's version of events. Did it really matter anymore? That thought crept in like poison. Maybe I should just let go. Let him believe what he wanted. Let Linda take over. I could just fade into the background, stop trying to prove my innocence to people who'd already convicted me. The exhaustion wasn't just physical. It was existential. After a certain age, you start to wonder if change is even possible, or if you're just rearranging deck chairs on a sinking ship. Maybe this was just how things were going to be now. Estranged from my son, suspected by my community, slowly drowning in the thankless work of caring for a mother who couldn't even remember my name half the time. Mom died 3 weeks later. Peacefully, they said, though I'm not sure what peace looks like when you're confused and afraid at the end. I was holding her hand when it happened, sitting in that hospital chair I'd occupied for 18 hours straight, watching the monitor as her heart rate slowed, stopped. The nurse came in, checked for a pulse, looked at the clock and noted the time. "I'm sorry for your loss," she said, and it was genuine, but also routine. Death in a hospital is common enough to have procedures. I sat there for a while after, just holding her hand as it cooled. She looked smaller in death, diminished, the worry lines smoothing out of her face. I thought about all the times she'd held my hand when I was scared. First day of school, after my divorce, when my father died. Now I was holding hers at the end, completing some circle I didn't fully understand. Marcus came to the hospital afterward. We stood on opposite sides of her bed, looking at her still face, and I waited for grief to bridge the gap between us. Instead, he said, "We need to talk about the funeral." Not, "I'm sorry." Not, "Are you okay?" Just logistics, next steps, the business of death. We met at my house 2 days later to plan the service. Linda flew in, all dramatic black clothing and practiced sorrow. She wore sunglasses even inside, pulled them off with theatrical timing to reveal red-rimmed eyes that I suspected had more to do with the flight than with grief. She hugged Marcus but barely looked at me, brushing past with a murmured, "We should get started." They sat together on my couch, like a united front, and I sat across from them in the chair I'd rocked Marcus in as a baby, feeling like a stranger in my own home. The chair still had a small stain on one arm from where he'd spilled juice when he was 4. I could see it from where I sat, a ghost of easier times. We discussed flowers, readings, music, normal funeral planning things. Mom wanted to be cremated, wanted her ashes scattered in Sedona where she'd honeymooned with my father. Simple, she'd said, when she was still lucid enough to discuss such things. No fuss, no expensive casket for people to stare at. Just return her to the red rocks she loved. Then Marcus pulled out a folder, placed it on my coffee table like he was serving a subpoena. The folder was manila, professional, with tabs visible along the sides suggesting organization, preparation. "Before we finalize anything," he said, his voice taking on that business-like tone he used for negotiations, "we need to settle the financial situation." I stared at the folder. My name was written on the tab in his neat handwriting, the same handwriting I'd helped him develop in 2nd grade when his letters were all crooked and backwards. "What financial situation?" My voice sounded far away, like it was coming from someone else. "The money you took from Grandma." Linda's voice was sharp, accusatory, triumphant. "We've documented everything, every withdrawal, every questionable expense. You owe the estate $660,000. The room tilted. I actually thought I might faint. The edges of my vision went dark and sparkly, and I had to grip the arms of the chair to stay upright. I didn't take anything. I paid her bills. I gave her the care she deserved. Marcus opened the folder. Inside was that invoice, printed, official-looking, insane. Line items that included emotional neglect, assigned a value of $80,000. Inadequate supervision, another $60,000. Questionable financial decisions, $150,000. Failure to consult family, $70,000. Each perceived failure assigned a dollar amount, like you could price out a mother's failures in neat columns. The invoice even had a footer with payment terms. Due upon receipt, late payments subject to interest at the rate of 10% per annum. "This is crazy," I whispered. "This is what the numbers show," Linda said, leaning forward with the energy of someone who'd been waiting for this moment. "You had complete control of her finances. No oversight. You could have been doing anything. I showed you the statements. I showed Marcus everything." "You showed us what you wanted us to see." Marcus's voice was cold, clinical, like he was discussing a business deal gone bad. But the bank records Linda obtained tell a different story. That's when something in me cracked. Not broke, cracked. Like ice over a lake, spider webbing out from the center. I looked at my son, really looked at him, and saw a stranger. Someone who could sit in his dead grandmother's house at her funeral planning meeting and present his mother with an invoice for parental failure. The invoice had my full name at the top, Margaret Elena Torres. My mother's name had been Elena. I'd been named for her, carried her name through my life as a badge of honor, and now her grandson was using that name on a bill of indictment. "Get out," I said quietly. They didn't move. Linda actually smirked, like she'd expected this reaction, and it confirmed something for her. "Get out of my house." Louder now. "Both of you. Take your fake invoice and your fake concern and get the hell out." Linda stood indignant, gathering her designer purse. "You can't just dismiss this. We have legal grounds. Then sue me. but do it from somewhere else because I want you out of my sight." Marcus gathered his folder, stood, looked at me with something that might have been regret or might have been relief that this was finally over. His hands were steady as he tucked the folder under his arm, no trembling, no hesitation. "We'll be in touch through our lawyer," he said. The door closed behind them with a quiet click that was somehow more final than a slam would have been. I sat in that chair for what must have been hours. The house was so quiet, just the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional car passing on the street. The shadows lengthened across the floor as the sun moved, and I didn't get up to turn on lights. I thought about calling someone, but who? Everyone I knew had already heard Linda's version. Everyone had already chosen sides. I picked up my phone, scrolled through contacts, and realized I didn't have a single person I could call who would definitely believe me. I thought about my mother, about the last conversation we'd had when she was still lucid enough to really talk. It was 3 months before she died, one of those random moments of clarity that sometimes break through the dementia fog. She'd held my hand and said, "You're a good daughter. Don't let anyone tell you different." Like she knew, like she could see what was coming. The invoice was still on the coffee table, offensive in its precision. $660,000 for being a failed mother. I picked it up, read through it again, and felt something shift inside me, that crack in the ice spreading wider. Because here's what I realized, sitting there in the growing darkness. I had been drowning, but I'd been holding the rope they threw me, not realizing it was tied to an anchor. Every apology, every explanation, every desperate attempt to prove myself had just pulled me deeper. They didn't want the truth. They wanted a villain, and I'd been so busy trying to prove I wasn't one that I'd lost myself in the process. I looked at my reflection in the dark window, and for the first time in months, I recognized the woman looking back. Tired, yes. Hurt, absolutely. But not defeated. Not yet. The next morning, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. The sun was just rising, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that reminded me of better times. I made coffee, opened my laptop, and started gathering every single document related to Mom's care. Bank statements, receipts, medical bills, facility contracts, everything. I created a spreadsheet, cross-referenced every withdrawal with its corresponding expense. By noon, I had a complete financial record that proved, beyond any shadow of doubt, that I hadn't taken a single penny that wasn't spent directly on my mother's care. In fact, the spreadsheet revealed something I'd been too overwhelmed to calculate before. I'd actually covered $17,000 of her expenses out of my own pocket when her pension hadn't kept up with facility rate increases. But I didn't send it to Marcus. Not yet. Because something Linda said kept echoing in my head. The bank records I obtained. How did she obtain them? She wasn't on the account. I'd set it up myself, named myself as sole power of attorney, specifically to avoid this kind of family drama. I called the bank, spoke to the branch manager I'd been working with for years, a woman named Patricia who'd helped me set up Mom's accounts, who knew the situation, who'd always been professional and kind. "Patricia, I need to ask you something. Has anyone else requested access to my mother's accounts? Besides me?" There was a pause. "Let me pull up the records." Another pause, longer this time, and I could hear her typing. "Oh," she said, and her voice changed. "Oh no." What she told me made my blood run cold. Linda had come in 6 months ago, claiming to be co-power of attorney, and had convinced a new teller, someone who didn't know me or the account history, to give her copies of statements. It was a violation of bank policy, possibly illegal, but it had happened. And those statements, Patricia suspected after reviewing the transaction logs, had been selectively edited before being shown to Marcus. "The teller made notes," Patricia said, her voice tight with apology. "Your sister asked specifically about large withdrawals. The teller, who shouldn't have done this, highlighted those transactions for her, without the corresponding deposit information or the context of what they were for." So she had a list of withdrawals with no explanation. Exactly. And I'm so sorry. I should have been notified immediately. This is a serious breach. We've already filed an internal complaint against that teller, and I'm escalating this to our fraud department. I hung up and sat very still, letting the pieces fall into place. Linda hadn't stumbled onto suspicious activity. She'd been building a case, manufacturing evidence, creating doubt where none should exist. And Marcus, my son, had believed her without question. The betrayal wasn't just that he'd doubted me. It was that he'd wanted to doubt me. Because doubting me gave him permission to step back, to not deal with the messy reality of aging parents, to focus on his shiny new life without the burden of family obligation. I became my own advocate that day. No more waiting for someone to believe me. No more hoping the truth would magically reveal itself. Medical studies prove that gaslighting causes low self-esteem, depression, and even suicidal thoughts. I'd been living in a fog of their creation, but now the fog was lifting, and I could see exactly what had been done to me. I hired a lawyer, found her through an online search for elder law attorneys, read reviews, called 3 before finding one who understood immediately what I was describing. Her name was Diane Chen, no relation to Mrs. Chen from my book club, and she was a shark in a tailored suit. "This is fraud," she said, reviewing my documents in her office. "What your sister did is bank fraud. What they're attempting with this invoice is extortion, and the damage to your reputation could constitute defamation." We filed a complaint with the bank, initiated an investigation into Linda's fraudulent access. We prepared a response to their ridiculous invoice that laid out, in excruciating legal detail, exactly how much I'd sacrificed for my mother's care. But more than that, I started preparing to walk away. I changed passwords on all my accounts, moved money to a new bank they didn't know about, gathered my important documents into a folder I kept ready by the door. I was done being a sitting target. The lawyer said Linda and Marcus would probably back down once they saw the evidence, that this kind of thing rarely went to actual court. But I didn't care anymore if they backed down or doubled down. I was ready to fight, and more importantly, I was ready to survive without them. The funeral happened a week later. Small, quiet, at a chapel in Scottsdale with a view of Camelback Mountain. I planned it myself, paid for it myself with money from my own account, invited the few people who still spoke to me. The facility sent a representative, Teresa, who gave me a long hug and whispered, "She loved you." We all knew that. Marcus and Linda came, sitting in the back like guests at a stranger's service. They arrived separately, Marcus alone, Linda with some friend she'd brought for support. I watched them in my peripheral vision, refusing to look directly at them. The pastor spoke about my mother's kindness, her love of music, her fierce independence even in decline. I read a poem she'd loved, Pablo Neruda, about death being only a different way of being. We sang Amazing Grace because it was her favorite, and I heard my voice crack on the chorus but kept going. And through it all, I felt her presence, not in some mystical way, but in the strength I'd inherited from her, the ability to endure, to rebuild. After the service, people filed out to their cars. I stood in the parking lot, feeling the October sun warm on my face when Marcus approached. "Mom," he started, and I held up my hand. "Don't. I just want to say, I know what you want to say. You're sorry, you were confused, Linda manipulated you, you should have trusted me. Did I get that about right?" He nodded, looking uncomfortable. His tie was loosened, face flushed, and I could see actual shame starting to break through whatever justifications he'd built. "Here's the thing, Marcus, you're right about all of that. But you know what you should really be sorry for? For not even trying to verify the truth before destroying our relationship. For sitting in my house, at your grandmother's funeral planning, and handing me an invoice like I was some kind of contractor who'd overbilled you." I pulled out a folder from my bag. My own folder, thick with evidence and legal documents. The weight of it felt good in my hands, solid proof instead of empty accusations. This is everything, every receipt, every bill, every bank statement, showing exactly where every penny went. Your lawyer can review it. Mine already has. And you know what we found? I didn't just manage your grandmother's care, Marcus. I covered shortfalls out of my own pocket. The facility raised rates twice in 2 years, and her pension didn't keep up, so I used my savings. $20,000 of my own money went to keeping her comfortable and safe. His face went pale, actually lost color right there in the parking lot sun. Mom, I didn't. So if anyone owes anyone money, you owe me. But I'm not going to invoice you for being a failed son. I'm just going to ask you to think about what kind of man you want to be. One who trusts strangers over his own mother? Or one who does the hard work of seeking truth, even when it's uncomfortable? I walked away before he could respond. Got in my car, hands trembling so badly I had to sit for a moment before I could drive. But underneath the trembling was something solid, something that felt like victory, or at least survival. I drove to Sedona like I'd planned, took the winding road through the red rocks, found the place Mom had described where she'd scattered my father's ashes decades ago. The rocks glowed in the afternoon sun, ancient and eternal. I scattered her ashes at sunset, watching them catch the light and drift on the wind, becoming part of the landscape she loved. I cried, finally, letting out months of grief and anger and hurt. But underneath it all was something new, something solid, peace, the kind that comes from knowing you did right by someone, even when everyone said you were wrong. The legal showdown happened at the community center, of all places. My lawyer suggested it, said neutral territory might keep things civil. We met in one of the conference rooms, the same room where I'd taught ESL classes, where I'd felt purposeful and valued. Now it was a courtroom of sorts. Linda and Marcus showed up with their attorney, some slick guy in an expensive suit who looked bored before we even started. He had that big, firm energy, like this small family dispute was beneath him, but he was billing enough to make it worth his time. My lawyer, Diane, laid out the evidence. Every document, every statement, every receipt. She'd organized it into binders, color-coded and tabbed, presenting it with the precision of a surgeon. The bank's internal investigation that confirmed Linda's fraudulent access. The testimony from Mom's facility about the quality of care I'd provided. Written statements from Teresa and 3 other staff members. The financial analysis showing I'd actually lost money caring for her. My client, Diane said, her voice calm and factual, spent approximately 2,000 hours over 2 years managing her mother's care. At a professional care manager's rate, that's worth $60,000. She absorbed $17,000 in shortfalls out of pocket. She provided emotional support, advocacy, and loving care that no price can capture. And for this, she's been accused of theft and exploitation. Linda's face got redder with each revelation. Marcus just looked smaller and smaller, sinking into his chair like he wanted to disappear through the floor. Their lawyer tried to argue about documentation standards, about oversight, about family communication. But Diane cut through it like a hot knife through butter. Your clients committed fraud, slander, and elder financial abuse in the process of accusing my client of the same. The evidence is clear. The bank has already taken action. If you proceed with this, we will countersue for defamation, emotional distress, and fraud. Are you prepared to defend that? The room went quiet, except for the buzzing of the fluorescent lights overhead and the distant sound of a class happening somewhere else in the building. We need a moment to confer with our clients, their lawyer finally said. They stepped outside. Through the window, I could see Linda gesturing wildly. Marcus, standing with his arms crossed, their lawyer shaking his head and checking his phone like he had better places to be. They came back 15 minutes later. We're withdrawing our claim, the lawyer said, his voice flat and professional. And, Diane prompted, looking at Marcus and Linda specifically. Marcus stepped forward. And I'm sorry. Mom, I'm so sorry. Linda showed me these statements, and they looked so damning, and I believed her. I should have come to you first. I should have trusted you. You should have, I agreed, but you didn't, and that tells me everything I need to know about where I stand in your life. That's not fair, Linda interjected. We were trying to protect. Protect what? I turned to her, and I saw her flinch. Good. Protect your inheritance? Because that's what this was really about, wasn't it? Making sure I wasn't spending money that you thought should eventually come to you? She didn't answer. Didn't need to. The truth was written all over her face, in the way her eyes darted away, in the defensive set of her shoulders. The aftermath was swift. Linda's fraudulent access to the bank accounts resulted in her being permanently banned from that institution and reported to state authorities. The state attorney general's office opened an investigation for elder fraud, even though the elder in question had passed away. The investigation revealed more than I'd expected. Linda had accessed Mom's accounts multiple times over 6 months, always asking different tellers, always with a slightly different story. She'd claimed to be verifying care expenses, checking for fraud, worried about her sister's mental state. She'd built a paper trail of concern that looked legitimate on the surface, but was really just reconnaissance for her attack. The bank's fraud investigator called me personally to apologize. We failed you, she said. Our systems should have flagged this. The same account accessed by someone claiming different relationships, different authorizations. We're implementing new protocols because of what happened to you. It was cold comfort. Protocols wouldn't give me back the months of agony, the destroyed relationships, the nights I couldn't sleep. Marcus's reputation in the real estate community took a hit when word got out about the false accusations against his mother. People talk, especially in a city like Phoenix, where business relationships are built on trust. His partners at his firm heard about it. Clients heard about it. I didn't spread the story. I didn't have to. Diane, my lawyer, had filed legal documents that became public record. Journalists looking for human interest stories found them. One investigative reporter from the Arizona Republic actually contacted me, wanted to do a story about elder care fraud and how families can turn on caregivers. I declined the interview, but she wrote the story anyway, using court documents and public records. The headline read, "When Family Becomes the Enemy, How False Elder Abuse Claims Destroy Caregivers." My name wasn't in it, but enough details were that anyone who knew us would recognize the story. Marcus's business partner, a man named Jeff who I'd met a few times at company events, called me. I had no idea, he said. Marcus never told us what was really going on. We just heard he was dealing with family issues and estate stuff. If we'd known he was accusing you without evidence. He lost a major development deal when his partners decided they didn't want to work with someone who'd publicly accused his own mother of elder abuse without evidence. The investors pulled out, citing concerns about judgment and character. One of them actually called me to apologize for not supporting me earlier, having heard my side through the legal grapevine. I should have reached out to you directly, the investor said. His name was Richard Chen, and he'd lost his own mother to dementia a few years ago. When I heard what really happened, how you'd actually paid out of pocket for her care, I know how hard that is. My family went through something similar, accusations flying when Mom was dying. It's cruel what people do to each other over money. I wish I could say I felt vindicated, but mostly I just felt tired. Not the hopeless exhaustion from before, but the clean tiredness that comes after you've finished a hard job. Linda went back to California. We haven't spoken since. I don't imagine we ever will again. Last I heard, she was facing legal trouble of her own, the bank fraud investigation leading to other discoveries about her finances. Karma works in mysterious ways. As for Marcus, he calls sometimes, leaves messages apologizing, asking to talk, wanting to rebuild. I listen to the messages and delete them. Maybe someday I'll be ready. Maybe not. Either way, it's my choice now. The friends who believed Linda's lies? Some apologized when the truth came out. I accepted their apologies, but kept my distance. You learn something about people when they're so quick to believe the worst of you, when they abandon you without asking for your side of the story. Mrs. Chen actually cried when she called to say sorry. She came to my house, brought homemade dumplings, sat in my kitchen and sobbed. "I was so stupid," she kept saying. "I should have known you better." And that one I forgave a little more easily. She's older, easily influenced, and I remember her kindness before all this started. Plus, the dumplings were really good. I moved, not far, just to a smaller place closer to the mountains. A condo with a balcony that overlooks the desert, where I can watch the sunset, paint the rocks orange and pink every evening. I wake up to silence that feels like a gift instead of a punishment. Make my coffee the way I like it, strong with just a little cream. Spend my days however I want. The move itself was cathartic. Packing up the house where I'd raised Marcus, where I'd weathered my divorce, where I'd sat in the dark after Linda and Marcus left with their invoice. I hired movers but did most of the packing myself, going through decades of accumulated life. I found Marcus's baby clothes in the attic, his first drawing of our family, where he'd made my smile too big and drawn hearts around all of us. I almost kept it. Almost. But in the end, I put it in a box labeled Marcus and left it in his old bedroom. If he ever wanted to collect his history, he knew where to find me. The new condo felt like a rebirth. Smaller, simpler, with none of the ghosts of the old house. I painted the bedroom a soft blue that reminded me of morning sky. Bought new furniture, nothing expensive, just pieces that made me happy. A reading chair by the window. A small dining table for one. Plants that I actually managed to keep alive. The condo is on the 3rd floor, and climbing the stairs every day is my exercise. My blood pressure is back to normal. I sleep through the night now. The antacids sit unused in the medicine cabinet. My first week there, I sat on the balcony every evening and watched the sunset. The desert has a particular quality of light that photographers travel across the world to capture, and I had it right outside my door. I'd watch the saguaro cacti turn into silhouettes, the mountains shade from rust to purple to black. Sometimes I'd cry, not from sadness exactly, but from the overwhelming relief of being alone without being lonely. I joined a new book club, one where nobody knows my history, started volunteering at a different organization, a women's shelter where I help residents navigate the legal system. Made new friends who know me as just me, not as anyone's daughter or mother, just a woman who shows up and does good work. The women at the shelter remind me why I fought back. They're escaping abuse, rebuilding lives, learning to trust again. I help them understand restraining orders, custody agreements, financial independence. I share my story sometimes, when it's relevant, when someone needs to hear that you can survive betrayal and come out stronger. One woman, Maria, was trying to get custody of her kids back from her mother-in-law who'd convinced the court that Maria was unfit. The accusations were lies, manufactured evidence, character assassination. Sound familiar? I sat with her, helped her organize her documentation, connected her with a lawyer. When she won her case and got her kids back, she hugged me and cried. "You saved us," she said. "I didn't save anyone. I just refused to let someone else's lies become my truth." And I taught her to do the same. It's like learning to live again, building a life where my worth isn't measured by other people's opinions or needs, where I'm not constantly defending myself or proving my value, where I can just be. Some mornings I still wake up angry. Angry at the time wasted, the relationships destroyed, the pain inflicted. Angry that I had to fight so hard to prove something that should have been assumed, that I loved my mother and cared for her well. But then I step onto my balcony, feel the desert air on my face, and remember that I'm free. Free from constantly proving myself, free from people who chose to believe lies, free from the weight of other people's expectations. I planted a garden on my balcony, tomatoes, herbs, flowers that bloom in the Arizona heat, marigolds and zinnias that don't mind the sun. There's something healing about putting your hands in dirt, about nurturing something and watching it grow. My mother would have loved it. She always wanted a garden, but never had the space in her apartments. The first time I harvested tomatoes from my little balcony garden, I cried. Not sad tears, but the kind that come from unexpected joy. I'd grown something. I'd nurtured these plants from seedlings to fruit-bearing life, and they'd rewarded my care with abundance. It felt like a metaphor I desperately needed. I started cooking again. Real meals, not crackers from the box. I'd make pasta with my fresh basil and tomatoes, sit at my little table for one, and actually taste the food. Savor it. I'd pour myself a glass of wine sometimes, just because I wanted to, not because I was trying to numb anything. One evening, sitting on my balcony with my dinner and my wine, watching the sunset turn everything golden, I realized I was happy. Not perfect, not healed, but genuinely content. It surprised me so much I laughed out loud. And my neighbor on the next balcony over looked at me with concern until I waved to show I was okay. I made friends with that neighbor eventually. Her name is Patricia, a widow in her 70s who'd lost her husband 2 years ago. We started having coffee together on Saturday mornings, sitting on one balcony or the other, talking about everything and nothing. She knew my story, I knew hers, and there was a comfort in being with someone who understood loss and betrayal without needing to dissect it constantly. "You know what I love about you?" Patricia said one morning. "You don't perform happiness. So many people, they're always trying to convince you they're fine, they're great, life is wonderful, but you're just real. Some days you're good, some days you're sad, and you don't apologize for either." I hadn't thought about it that way, but she was right. I'd stopped performing, stopped trying to be the perfect mother, the perfect daughter, the perfect victim or survivor. I was just being myself, whatever that looked like on any given day. Sometimes I think about that invoice. $660,000 for being a failed mother. I kept a copy, not as a reminder of the pain, but as proof that I survived, that I fought back, that I didn't let their narrative become my reality. It's in a folder in my desk, filed under Evidence of Survival. Every few months I take it out and look at it. Not to torture myself, but to remember, to remind myself how far I've come. The first few times, looking at it made my hands shake and my blood pressure spike. Now I can look at it almost clinically, like it's a historical document from someone else's life. I've thought about throwing it away, burning it even, in some symbolic gesture of letting go. But I keep it because it's proof, not of my failure, but of their cruelty. And sometimes you need proof, even if it's just for yourself, that you didn't imagine it, that it really was as bad as you remember. George, the man from Mom's facility who I used to visit, sent me a letter a few months after I moved. His handwriting was shaky but legible. "I heard about what happened with your family," he wrote. "I'm sorry they couldn't see what I saw, what everyone at the facility saw. You were the kind of daughter I wish I had. Your mother knew that, even when she couldn't remember your name. Love doesn't need memory to exist." I cried when I read that letter. Put it in the same folder as the invoice. Evidence of survival. Evidence that not everyone believed the lies. Evidence that love, real love, recognizes itself even through the fog of dementia and the distortion of family betrayal. Before I close this chapter of my life, I want to share something important I learned through all of this, something that could save you or someone you love from similar manipulation. Financial exploitation within families is more common than most people realize. According to the National Council on Aging, approximately 1 in 10 Americans over 60 experiences some form of elder abuse, and financial exploitation is the most prevalent type. I was part of that statistic, accused of the very thing I was actually protecting my mother from. Here's what I learned. When you're caring for an aging parent, document everything. Not because you expect your family to turn on you, but because memory fades, emotions run high, and money has a way of making people irrational. I had kept good records, thank God, but I should have been even more thorough. Set up a separate email account just for correspondence related to your parents' care. Forward all medical bills, facility invoices, insurance statements to that account. Create a simple spreadsheet tracking every expense. It doesn't have to be complicated, just dates, amounts, and brief descriptions. Take photos of receipts. Save them in a cloud storage that's backed up. I use 3 different backup systems now, maybe overkill, but I never want to be vulnerable again. More importantly, understand that family members who aren't involved in day-to-day care often have no idea what things actually cost. Memory care facilities can run $6,000 to $8,000 a month in major cities. More in places like San Francisco or New York. Medications for elderly patients with multiple conditions can easily hit $1,000 or more monthly. Physical therapy, occupational therapy, specialized medical equipment, none of it is cheap. A motorized wheelchair can cost $15,000. A hospital bed for home use, $3,000. Adult diapers, nutritional supplements, specialized clothing, it all adds up. When family members who aren't paying the bills see large withdrawals, they can panic and assume the worst. Their ignorance becomes suspicion, and suspicion, left unchecked, becomes accusation. Communication is critical. Send regular updates to all family members, even the ones you don't get along with, especially the ones you don't get along with. Detail the care your parent is receiving and approximate costs. Give them opportunities to review statements if they want to. Yes, it's extra work. Yes, it feels like you're defending yourself when you shouldn't have to. But it creates a paper trail that protects you. I started sending monthly email updates after Mom moved into memory care. I stopped after 6 months because no one ever acknowledged them. That was a mistake. I should have kept sending them anyway, creating that documented record of transparency. Watch for warning signs that someone is trying to manipulate other family members against you. Sudden questions about finances from relatives who've never asked before. Requests for bank statements from people who aren't entitled to them. Family members reaching out to your parents' friends or neighbors asking questions. Someone creating a narrative of concern that feels disproportionate to the situation. These can all be red flags that someone is building a case. Linda started her campaign months before confronting me. I found out later she'd been calling people from Mom's church, telling them she was worried about her sister's stress levels, planting seeds of doubt, creating a foundation for her accusations. Looking back, I can see the pattern now. It started small. A phone call where she asked how Mom was doing, seemingly innocent. Then another call asking if I needed help with anything, if the costs were manageable. Then questions about specific expenses. That seems like a lot for medication. Are you sure that's right? Creating doubt disguised as concern. She'd call Marcus too, I learned later. I'm worried about your mom, she'd say. She seems so stressed. Do you think she's okay handling everything? Undermining me while pretending to care. It's a sophisticated form of manipulation, and it works because it comes wrapped in the language of family love and concern. The irony is that if Linda had actually wanted to help, if she'd offered to share the burden of caregiving instead of just the burden of criticism, I would have welcomed it. Caring for someone with dementia is isolating and exhausting. I would have loved to have had someone to share that with. But she didn't want to help. She wanted to control, to accuse, to position herself as the concerned family member while I was cast as the villain. If you suspect fraud or manipulation, act quickly. Contact your bank immediately if you discover unauthorized access to accounts. File police reports if necessary. Consult with an elder law attorney before problems escalate. Many will give you a free initial consultation, and the investment in legal advice early can save you enormous heartache later. I waited too long to lawyer up, thinking I could fix it with family conversation. By the time I hired Diane, the damage to my reputation was extensive. Don't make that mistake. Also understand that power of attorney is a powerful tool, but also a vulnerable position. Some states allow other family members to petition courts if they suspect abuse, which sounds good in theory, but can be weaponized by bad actors. Know your rights. Know what you're required to disclose and what you're not. Don't let aggressive family members bully you into providing information you're not legally obligated to share. Finally, and this is perhaps the most important thing I learned, protect your own mental health. Financial caregiving combined with actual caregiving is overwhelming. The stress can manifest physically. I developed high blood pressure, lost weight, couldn't sleep. Those are all warning signs your body is telling you something is wrong. Find a support group for caregivers. They exist in every major city and online. Talking to people who understand what you're going through, who won't judge you for feeling overwhelmed or resentful or exhausted, that community is invaluable. I wish I'd found one sooner. I finally joined one 6 months after Mom died, and it helped me process everything that had happened. And if you're watching this and recognizing yourself in my story, if you're the family member who's been convinced that a caregiver is exploiting your loved one, please, I'm begging you, verify before you vilify. Ask for documentation. Offer to review bills together. Offer to help with the actual work of caregiving so you understand what's involved. But don't go behind their back to banks or neighbors. Don't build a case against them without talking to them first. The damage you can do to a relationship based on suspicion and hearsay is sometimes irreparable. Marcus and I may never repair what was broken. That's not dramatic. It's just realistic. Some bridges, once burned, can't be rebuilt. But I can live with that because I know the truth. I did right by my mother. I cared for her with love and integrity. And when I was accused of doing the opposite, I fought back with facts and won. That's what I want you to take from this. You can survive betrayal by your own family. You can rebuild a life after it's been torn apart. You can be your own advocate when everyone else fails you. It's hard, it's painful, but it's possible. And to anyone out there caring for an aging parent right now, doing the hard work that nobody sees, that nobody appreciates until it's done wrong, I see you. I know what you're sacrificing. The time, the money, the emotional energy. The parts of yourself you're giving up to keep someone else safe and comfortable. Document it. Protect yourself. But also know that you're doing something profoundly important. Don't let anyone make you doubt that. There are moments in caregiving that no one talks about. The beauty hidden inside the tragedy. The last time my mother looked at me and really saw me, 3 days before she fell and broke her hip. She said my name, clear as day. Elena, she said, calling me by her own name, and I didn't correct her because it didn't matter. She was saying my name with love, and that was enough. Or the time she hummed along to Amazing Grace in the chapel service at her facility, even though she couldn't remember the words anymore. Music lives in a different part of the brain than memory, and for those 3 minutes she was whole again, connected to something deeper than dementia could touch. These are the moments I hold on to. Not the invoice, not the accusations, not the betrayal. Those things happened and they mattered and they changed me. But they don't define the relationship I had with my mother. Only I get to define that. Only I was there for all of it. The beautiful and the terrible, the lucid moments and the lost ones. When people ask me now if I have regrets, I tell them the truth. I regret that my family couldn't see what I was doing. I regret the time wasted defending myself instead of just living. I regret that Marcus and I may never repair what was broken. But I don't regret caring for my mother. I don't regret fighting back when I was accused. I don't regret building a new life when the old one became toxic. Thank you for staying with me until the end of this story. It wasn't easy to tell, and I imagine it wasn't always easy to hear. But if it helps even one person avoid what I went through, or gives one caregiver the courage to stand up for themselves, then sharing it was worth it. I'd love to know where you're listening from and what time it is there. Are you someone caring for a parent right now? Have you experienced family betrayal over money? What would you have done in my place? The comments section is open, and I read every single one. Sometimes I respond, especially to people who are going through similar situations and need support. If this story resonated with you, please consider hitting that like button. It helps others who need to hear this find it. And if you're not already subscribed, I'd be honored if you joined our community. We share real stories about real struggles, and we support each other through them. No judgment, no fake positivity, just honest accounts of difficult situations and how people survived them. Before you go, I want to recommend 2 other videos that might interest you. One is about recognizing gaslighting in family relationships, the warning signs I wish I'd paid attention to earlier. And the other is about protecting yourself legally when you become a caregiver, all the documents you should have in place. Both are filled with practical advice from people who've been through it, legal experts, and therapists who specialize in family dynamics. I also want to mention that if you're in a situation similar to mine right now, feeling isolated and accused, please know that resources exist. The National Center on Elder Abuse has hotlines and support services. Elder law attorneys often do free consultations. Local caregiver support groups meet in every major city and online. You don't have to face this alone, even when it feels like you're completely isolated. And document everything. I can't stress this enough. Every conversation, every expense, every decision. It feels paranoid and exhausting, but if you're ever challenged, that documentation becomes your shield and your sword. I had good records, but I wish I'd had better ones. I wish I'd recorded some of those phone calls with Linda where she was so sweet to my face. I wish I'd kept copies of every email, every text, every interaction. Until the next story, take care of your heart. It's the only one you've got, and it deserves people who treat it with respect. People who choose to believe in you, who seek truth instead of accepting convenient lies, who stand by you when things get difficult. And if you don't have those people right now, be that person for yourself. That's what I learned. That sometimes you have to be your own hero, your own defender, your own family. It's not how I imagined my 60s would look, but it's honest, and it's mine. And nobody can take that away from me. I'm 63 now, a year older than when this story started, a lifetime wiser. And I'm okay. More than okay. I'm free.